All right, we are live. Hello and welcome everybody. My name is Yuri, and on this channel we talk about studying in United States, working in United States, and immigration. And we have Nicole. Nicole, why don't you introduce yourself and also what's Manifest?
Thank you for having me, Yudi. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for having me here. So my name is Nicole Gunara. I'm the principal immigration attorney at Manifest Law. A lot of our work has to do with helping many individuals out there work, reside, remain, be in the United States. We'd like to support immigration journeys. We're a very tech-enabled, forward-looking law firm, right? We really try to provide legal services to people who need it and who need that support. And we try to leverage technology to make it done or supported in the best way possible.
Amazing. I know last time we did this, people loved you and loved your context as well, and like how you were able to answer the questions. So we have a lot of questions already lined up. So I'm going to start picking them up. But before we do this, I know there was a visa situation, F1 visa were paused. Do you have like an overall update, like what's going on with the situation, and then like where are we right now?
So this is kind of like the TLDR for a lot of people because there's so many news stories out there. There's so many different interpretations of what happened. But my understanding is that a cable was essentially leaked or discovered where there was instructions sent to U.S. consulates internationally to basically say, hey, do not schedule new student appointments for Fs and Js, things that are kind of supported using the SEVA system, because we are going to integrate stronger reviews for these applications, especially when it comes to social media. Technically speaking, Trump administration officials haven't necessarily confirmed 100% of exactly what is happening, but what I can tell you as of right now is that there are changes actively occurring, right? People who have literally just yesterday or the day before yesterday went into the consulate for appointments have had their applications held up. Right? They're either being put into administrative processing or they're being told, hey, you need to come back later. They'll issue like a 221G notice basically saying we need more information regarding your social media, or we need to take a look at additional information before we continue processing. For the longest time, when we saw a lot of these news articles, it wasn't clear exactly what they meant by additional appointments or new appointments, but it seems to be impacting people who are seeking, even if they already have scheduled appointments, F1s leading into the summer or the fall season.
Got it. And we probably also don't know like when it would restart, because it looks like those are the questions people are asking, like when will the slots reopen before the intake finishes, etc.
Right. So we don't have a lot of insight at the moment, right? I will say that I have a theory where the reality is that there's a lot of students who are incoming to the United States, right? A lot of universities in the United States rely on foreign students when it comes to aspects of their income, right? International students pay the most. Trust me, I felt that burden before. The reality is that it is very possible that something will be resolved. I think my ultimate concern, and I know everyone here is very concerned, is timing, right? Is it possible that this is going to get restarted in a month, 2 months, 3 months? Because if it is 3 months, it's going to be very difficult to make it on time. I generally will tell people to keep in touch with their DSOs, to keep in touch with their international students offices. A lot of my friends and colleagues who work in academia have told me pretty privately that they're trying to figure out maybe scenarios to start orientation remotely, to do classes remotely, because the reality is that these are things that are out of their control and out of your control as well.
Got it. Okay. I know there are probably going to be more questions, so I'll pick those questions as they come. But I also wanted to let everybody know that if you have not just F1 situation, but H1B, L1s, and O1s, Manifest definitely can help you with any and all of the immigration situation. And I'll also put like quick link so people can access it. You do get $250 discount for the consultation, which is amazing. So thank you, Manifest, for doing this. So if you are in the situation where you need to consult a lawyer for your case, please go check it out. All right, Nicole, ready for questions? A lot of them.
Sure. Let's
All right, cool. Okay. Um, My perm is approved and I-140 is not filed yet, and my company is having a layoff. Can the new company file I-140 if I change the job?
So if you change jobs, you do need to restart the perm process, right? The reality is that remember that a perm is tied to that permanent job offer that is being provided to you by that previous company. The one thing that I will say is that it's unclear from this question if you are already laid off or you're thinking that you're going to get laid off. See what you can do to get the I-140 filed ASAP. Try to secure that priority date so at least you can get it absorbed by the new company.
Okay. Cool. All right. I started working for company X from April 7, 2025 on post-completion OPT. Looks like there's a follow-up. I got my first paycheck this weekend, but my company registered me as a contract or W-8 BN and have changed my status to W-2 from May 1st. Okay.
So do you think them paying you is going to be an issue? I don't necessarily think it's going to be an issue. The reality is that you can theoretically, I'm assuming you're not doing STEM OPT and that you're on normal OPT, you could be unpaid. You could also be a freelance, contractor, depending on how your I-20 was updated. I am of the general opinion that it's better to tell your DSO than not, to just make yourself comfortable, right? I just don't have access to your I-20 and how it was reported. But my understanding is that, you don't necessarily have to be paid on regular OPT. You just have to be employed. That's a strange note, but that's true.
Nice. Okay. Could you please provide your suggestion? I've filed H4 extension and H4 EAD renewal. Both are pending as of today. My husband's H1B extension is already approved. Now, if I go to India and get H4 stamping done with my husband, will it impact H4 EAD renewal application?
So it will not impact your EAD renewal because it was already filed. But I guess my question is like the order of operation. So you already filed the H4 extension concurrently. The extension will actually get dropped because you're not necessarily in the United States anymore. I'm assuming that you're leaving based on your I-94 expiring. So if you leave, and you're based here right now on pending stay because you have a timely filed extension, that's where things get a little bit tricky, to be honest with you. So I do need a little bit more information, but generally speaking, it is a smart decision to do an H4 extension through leaving the country and coming back with a valid visa stamp, because even if you needed to file an EAD renewal before the end of your EAD timeline, you would now be qualified for the automatic extension. As a reminder for everybody here, the automatic extensions for H4 EADs are only provided to you if your I-94 is valid for that period of time, which is usually rare for H4 individuals. It doesn't make any sense because this is part of like a government settlement from many years ago. But the trick in the book that a lot of immigration attorneys have is leave, come back on your husband's already approved H-1B extension showing your marriage certificate with your valid H-4, and then file your EAD.
Got it. Okay. Can I travel using my valid F1 visa from my first institution, which I graduated and came back home? I have new I-120 and paid service fee.
Yeah. Your F1 doesn't necessarily have to be approved for the same university. I'll give you an example. Imagine that, so some individuals or some nationalities, their F1 stamps are valid for like 4 years or 5 years, right? You started at Yale, you transferred to NYU 2 years in, you can exit and re-enter on that valid F1 visa, even though it says Yale, based on that new I-20 for NYU in that circumstance.
Nice. Okay. Master's in Computer Science at Purdue, fall 2024. I'm on CPT, remote internship, working hybrid for now, ends in August. Can I visit India July to August and return for fall semester? And this will probably extend to part-time CPT on the same, same problem in December. I'm not sure what that means.
Yeah, so let me try to parse this out a little bit. So you're on CPT, right? I'm assuming that means you're on valid I-20 at the moment, on valid F1. The question on whether or not you can visit India and return for this fall semester actually depends on whether or not you actually have a valid visa stamp while maintaining a valid I-20, right? Considering everything that's happening right now, I don't think I generally recommend travel, right? If you don't have a valid F1 stamp and you need to be able to come back with that valid stamp, you can't really do that right now, considering that they're pausing all of the stamp adjudications, right? So I would just stay put. I would not leave if I could.
Yeah, but I'm assuming in reading his question, he is in a summer break where he's doing an internship, and he's gonna come back for semester, which will be his third semester. So I'm assuming he has valid stamp and
I think the question then becomes like, does he have actually a valid visa stamp on his passport, right? Because just because you have a valid I-20 doesn't mean that your passport has a valid stamp as well. Because I want to remind everybody who's here, there's two documents, right? You have the I-20, which is what allows you to even be in the United States, go to school, certain work authorizations as well. And then you have the visa stamp in your passport that allows you to travel. That is your entry document. Those are two very different things. And in addressing this question, what I'm not sure of is whether or not you have that valid visa stamp on your passport that says F1. If it's no longer valid, then I do not recommend traveling at this time, since they're not even allowing you to do the appointments.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Cool. I'm currently on F1 OPT and expires on June 24, 2025. I currently got laid off this week, but my employer filed my I-983 form and I have to submit my STEM OPT. Do I wait until the last day or file it?
Remember that when you have an I-983 form, you're affirming that that is what you're going to be doing on your STEM OPT, right? So if you're no longer working for the company and you're affirming that you're going to be working for this company on your STEM OPT, that doesn't feel very accurate to me, right? So I know this is going to sound really terrible in the sense that you will have about a month to figure out a new role. You need to figure out a new role that can sponsor you for this I-983, and you need to file it as soon as possible, because unlike the OPT where you have a period after graduation in order to file that EAD card, for STEM OPT, you do need to file it before the end of your current OPT.
Lots of OPT questions. I guess that's the season we are in, so probably.
The season we are in.
Recently, my employer allowed me to work remotely. Do we need to submit anything to USCIS and this transition if resident address is within the same MSA?
So I'm gonna just ask, like, I think you're talking about being on an H-1B, right? Because for all I know, you could be on an E3. There are many Australian Indians out there, right? But what I'm gonna say is that if this is an H-1B and what you're referencing is that the LCA either A, listed a work site that is within the metropolitan statistical area, or B, I had this scenario come up where there was an office address and a home address, and then the office shut down, right? In the scenario where there was only one address listed, which is the work address, and your residence is in the same metropolitan statistical area, essentially the employer just needs to update the PAF file, the public access file, with a memo explaining the move, right? The only thing is that you really do need to make sure that the residence is within the same MSA, right? A lot of people think that, oh, if I just move one county over, that's no problem because it's commutable, yes or no. I would always double check with the company's attorneys, and also double check your own LCA, right? Don't take the word for it for anyone. Always look at your own paperwork, make sure that it aligns up well, and make sure that they do document it appropriately inside of the public access files.
Nice. Okay. I got accepted to master's in different state and university, but my visa, it was initially for another university in another state. Oh, so this is from the first question where she said she could travel on the first university.
So what you're saying is that when you went to the consulate and you got your F1 visa, you were accepted to one university, and you had a plan to go there, but then now you've been accepted to a different university before traveling, right?
Yeah, no, she looks like she graduated.
Yeah. If your F1's visa is still valid, that's fine, right? Just show with your new I-20 and the fact that you paid your service fee.
Okay. EB1C question. Lived in US for 9 years. Have H1B and I-140. Currently working from UK for last 15 months for a US company. Responsibilities include managing my team, hiring but no manager. Am I eligible?
Okay, currently working in the UK for the last 15 months for a US company. So is it US sourced though? Like, is it that the US company doesn't have an affiliate or an entity abroad? Because I want to make it clear for EB1C and even an L1A, which is like the younger brother of the EB1C, the way that I think about it and what I always tell people is that if you work remotely for a US company, that is not an intra-company transferee visa, right? You need to have two associated companies, or at minimum, a US company and an associated branch abroad, right? The best way to kind of illustrate it is that you need to work 1 year in the past 3 years for like Citibank in the UK, and you're being transferred to Citibank in New York, right? Looking at kind of this analysis, the funny thing is about responsibilities and everything, it doesn't necessarily matter if there is no foreign entity that is involved and related to the US entity.
I like how you said Elvin is a younger brother.
But the only one other thing that I wanted to touch on is that I always remind people for intercompany transferee visas and those EB1Cs, title is not determinative, right? What determines what makes a good senior manager or an executive is what you do and proving that you do managerial things, right? You have the capacity to hire and fire other people? Do you have the capacity to promote or recommend actions against them? Do you have the capacity to delegate tasks? Are you overseeing professional subordinates, people who have bachelor's degrees and need bachelor's degrees to fulfill their roles? That is determinative, not a job title.
Love it. Okay. I joined bachelor's in 2021 and visa expires in 2026. I was thinking of renewing F1 visa now in summer of 2025 because I'll do 4+1 master's degree, I'm assuming. Is the renewal now a good idea or not? I want to be able to travel internationally.
The answer is no. like with everything that's happening now, the answer is no, because I cannot emphasize enough that we don't know when the processing is going to restart, right? As of right now, they've kind of kept them up. Is it that when you leave the country today, are you going to come back in a month? Are you coming back in 2 months, in 3 months? Or what if it's a year, right? Because we don't have any information. If you're already in the United States, and yes, it's not ideal that you can't travel the world and that you may not be able to see your family, unfortunately. The reality is that if you want to pursue your education, if you want to be comfortable in the US, stay in the United States at the moment.
Yep. Arav is asking F1 visa update. Arav, go back in the very beginning of the stream. We started with that, but essentially no new update other than we just have to wait and see what they do.
And I guess the only thing that I can affirm is that anecdotally speaking, a lot of people have had their, let's call it their visa processing paused. They will go into the consulate, they will do the interview. Nothing's wrong with the interview, but they're being told, hey, we have to put you into administrative processing, or hey, you need to come back later because we need more time to review your application, right? And I think part of that is tied to all of these news stories right now where they're trying to enhance their level of scrutiny and how they're going to enhance that level of scrutiny.
Okay. Okay, that's not important. Will there be any issue with 10% pay cut during H1B for a short period of time? Company on a budget issues.
Remember that on an H-1B, when they submit an LCA, they agree to pay you a wage, right? There's a listed wage that's there. If you are being paid below that wage, they need to file an H-1B amendment to reflect that, right? Even if you are accepting of the circumstances and you're okay with being underpaid than what is declared on the LCA, right? The company has an obligation to the Department of Labor to update them along with USCIS, because then you will have every right to sue them for that money back.
Okay. I am 18 years old. I want to apply for high school completion program at Green River College. Is my age a problem in getting visa approved? It's urgent.
I guess my question is, does this high school completion program even issue F1s, right? Or issue I-20s, sorry, right? I've had a similar set of questions before, only to find out that these colleges don't issue I-20s for these. So even if you're accepted into the program, you need to make sure you have the right documentation to even apply for an F1 visa in the first place, right? My understanding is that age is not necessarily an issue if you can demonstrate the need for it. Like you don't have a high school diploma, you don't have a high school degree. But I actually would double check with Green River College if they're able to issue you an I-20 based on this.
Interesting. Yeah. If someone forget to file AR11 and after that their visa and visa extension are also approved, should they file AR11 now after 5 years of staying in that address?
I will say you should always maintain compliance, right? It's better to mitigate by saying to the government, like, this is where I live now, right? The reality is that it's not ideal that you haven't updated your address, but I would rather that you try to maintain compliance to the best of your ability.
Okay. I already have my F1 visa renewal schedule. Should I go back and do it this summer? Is it already expired? And I came in the country last fall on a visa waiver.
I'm a little bit concerned about this. So if you're saying that you came into the country on a visa waiver, and I'm assuming that you mean ESTA, right? And you've been here since last fall, that doesn't sound right because ESTA is only valid for 90 days, right? That could mean that you've just overstayed your ESTA period, right? I think a lot of people misunderstand that an ESTA waiver, right? The authorization is valid for 2 years, but that doesn't mean you get to stay here for 2 years. It's every time you enter, you're allowed to stay here for 90 days, right? If what I just described is your circumstance, you have bigger fish to fry right now. You have bigger issues to deal with at the moment.
Yeah. How long does paper-based H-1B petition processing takes if you opt for premium processing?
Let's see here. Paper-based H-1B. Okay, it's 15 business days, right? If you file the H-1B petition and you pay for premium processing, the government is supposed to give you their first adjudication or their final adjudication within 15 business days, right? They're either going to RFE it or they're going to directly approve it. If they RFE it and you paid for premium processing, once they get the response to that request for evidence, they will adjudicate that response within 15 business days as well.
Nice. Okay. I have, we already been, schedule in Hong Kong. I made an error on DS-160 where I did not list my social media. The appointment freeze means I cannot reschedule. Should I stay in USA or return?
Stay in USA. If let's say your goal is that, hey, I want to be able to make sure that I am here for the fall start. If you're already here on F1, right, and you're allowed to stay, stay.
I'm on STEM OPT and it will expire in February 2020. Clarity. I am done my master's in information system, graduated in December 2023. Are there any benefits involved if I pursue PhD?
Sorry, Yuri, I lost you for a second there. So let me take a moment to read it. So you said, I'm on STEM OPT. It will expire in February 2027. I'm planning to pursue PhD now, but I need more clarity. I've done my master's in information systems, graduated. Are there any benefits if I pursue PhD? I think it depends on your objectives, right? PhDs can give you a lot of benefits in the sense that, let's say you were trying to target for an EB2 NIW, right? The guidances make it clear that if you have a relevant PhD in the field, you get almost like a +1 to your application. There is a level of deference to that, right? Other things that I would also consider as well is the fact that when you're on a PhD, sometimes you have access to academic resources that can help boost your profile or build evidence towards an EB1A, right? So I think what you need to actually consider instead is, what are my objectives, right? If you're trying to gun for a green card and your field can provide, or at least this PhD can provide you benefits to improve your evidence and your credibility within your field, then it's okay. It kind of makes sense for you to pursue PhD.
Yeah. Okay. I'm doing my PhD, joined in 2019. My I-20 end date was initially May 2024, and F1 visa expired July 2024. Okay. I had to extend my I-20 due to research work taking longer, which has been approved by school. Is it good idea to get F1 renewed by traveling to India?
I just wouldn't leave the country right now if you're in the United States. Like, I know, okay, so this is one thing I wanna really address with the crowd here. I can deeply empathize the fact that travel is very important, right? You want to be able to see your family. You want to be able to take the holidays, the things that you've already planned. Maybe you've invested a lot of money on something that you're already trying to do, right? I can feel that pain. I think that becomes a question of balancing priorities, right? If your priority is that I need to be able to know for a fact that I'm going to be in the United States by X date, or I want to know that I'm going to be able to maintain my F1 status in the United States, stay. Right? There is no clarity at this moment on when things are going to restart. And even if they restart soon, you have to imagine the backlog that this has created, right? It's going to be a fight for these appointments. Even though F1 appointments, J1 appointments, and the like are technically accelerated and prioritized, right? Whenever there's a pause, it's the same pause that people felt during COVID. There's usually a lot of after effects when it comes to waiting and delays.
Okay. I'm Chinese and on my second year of my H-1B visa with approved national interest waiver, EB2, I-140, and I plan to travel back to China for H-1B stamp. Given the current circumstances, will there be an increasing risk?
So I will tell you that H-1Bs are a little bit different, right? The denial basis is usually on a 212, like you've done criminality, maybe there's a fraud issue or a national security issue. Sometimes you can be put into administrative processing if there's something that's just flagged in their system. I do think the risk is less for H-1Bs, but I have had a lot of anecdotal stories told to me from certain Chinese nationals who have been stuck in administrative processing with the government citing national security concerns, right? What kind of research have you been involved with? And I'm not saying that anyone has done anything wrong, right? It's more so that there are certain contexts that give the government pause, right? So my perspective, and I think I'm going to keep repeating this for a while on this particular day, on this particular Q&A, if there's no reason to leave the country, I would just stay. I would just stay until things kind of really settle, let's say. We are still in a tumultuous period of time because we're in the first 6 months of a new administration with many policy changes, right? It's very hard to predict what's going to happen, how things are going to flow because everything is so new, right? Yudi, I will tell you, like you and I have done this Q&A before, and in the past, we've had similar questions when we first had the change of administration, right? And I think my answer was still the same. Wait it out until things settle down, right? That is going to be my motto for a lot of these kinds of questions when it comes to visa renewals.
Yes. This is an interesting one. What exactly do they mean by social media vetting? I mean, I don't know, we know this, but do you know, Nicole, anything?
Yeah, so essentially what I would summarize is that the government is trying to enhance procedures where they're looking at your Instagram, they're looking at your LinkedIn, they're looking at, you know, TikTok and all of these kind of social media platforms that are out there. Because I guess the way that I envision it is, you guys all know the DS-160 system. It's pretty antiquated. The questions haven't really changed that much in like the last 10 years. They basically just go, hey, if you have any social media, like, put the information here. And if your social media doesn't fall in this drop down menu of very limited options that were popular circa 2008, like Facebook, YouTube, and the like, they basically tell you like, hey, you can, they even still call it Twitter, not X. They're like, hey, here's another box. You can add anything else that you want. So it was very loose. I think my thinking is that they're probably going to update the DS-160 form right? Make it much more intensive, which is that if you have Instagram, if you have YouTube, if you have all of these social media platforms, you must declare it. And you must tell us your social media handles and provide us links, right? Alternatively, because I never know what the backend system looks like for the government, they might also be providing databases, access to resources to allow an officer to scrub the internet very quickly to see what things have you done, what kind of social media posts have you been doing? Did you do a hashtag ad when you weren't supposed to be generating an income during the time that you were on F1, right?
Oh,
So I
wow.
think that's what they're trying to do.
Mhm. Yeah. And sorry, before we and let's say you don't reveal that in DS-160 for some reason, you're like, okay, I don't want to like take chances. Could that also affect?
Sorry, Yuri, it cut off for like a second, but I think what you said is that does that affect, right, your application, right, more or
Yeah.
less? The answer is that you should always be truthful, right? At the end of the day, omission, right? And it's one thing if it's not willful, right? You completely forgot that back in the day you had a Tumblr, right? Something like that. But willful omission is still willful misrepresentation, right? If the government asks you for something and you have it, you should provide it, right? At least at the moment, right? You shouldn't feel like you have something to hide. I think if there's anything to give you pause, you're thinking to yourself, you know, I'm worried because maybe I said something or I did something in the past. That's when you have to consider to yourself, like, is it worth it for me to try to go abroad right now and try for a visa, right? I think what I would caution people at the moment looking towards the future, right? I think social media is important, right? I personally don't have a lot of social media platforms, but I can understand why people really do invest their time and are involved in social media. Please just be very cautious about what you choose to post, what you choose to say, and what you choose to do, right? Being lawful, maintaining compliance, right? Doing things that are well within the confines of your F1, your J1, and your current status, right? That is of utmost importance right now. I think I've been yelling to like the universe, like compliance, 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 right? You have to remember that the visas that are out there, the government considers it a privilege, right? So when you are here on a specific status and you're here on social media, be very mindful, right? Be mindful of making sure that you're not doing anything that would conflict with that status.
Yeah. Okay. Being on O1, is there any travel restriction while someone's I-140 is approved and priority date is near current?
So I get this question a lot, right? Because when you Google the O1 and you Google the words dual intent, there's so many websites that say O1 is dual intent, right? But if you actually look at the way that the regulations are written, right, and you look at the guidances, the O1 is only technically a pseudo dual intent visa, where you have to prove that you don't have to prove that you maintain a residence abroad, right? That being said, though, at the end of the day, the only true dual intent visas that are out there are the H-1B and the L-1, where they clearly put into the rules that, hey, you are allowed to have the interest to permanently immigrate. That doesn't necessarily hold true on the O-1, right? So what I tell a lot of people is that if you're really nearing the current date, let's say, for your priority date at the moment, I would rather you just stay. I wouldn't travel, right? Because you never know when to say, oh, yes, we said that, but that doesn't mean that we're going to let you adjust in the United States. That doesn't mean we're going to let you in to do that adjustment.
Yeah, he just added like while EB1A I-140 is approved and being on O1 for the travel restriction. But yeah. Okay. What is the consequences if my company registered a wrong start dates on my W-2 as compared to my I-20 service portal and my EAD card?
Isn't this the same guy who said
Yeah.
that they started as an independent contractor, right?
Or the, yeah.
So I will say, right, again, my understanding is that you did get paid for that initial period of time is that you were just paid on a 1099 basis, right? My understanding is that on the OPT, the method of payment is not what is kind of at question. It's just whether or not you had a bona fide employer-employee relationship or that you had something that allows you to be there on the OPT, right? Like I mentioned, you could technically be on an unpaid internship on an OPT, theoretically speaking. You should probably talk to your DSO just to make sure. But I think my answer kind of still holds, right? Which is that,
Yeah.
hey, I think you should be okay, right? And I think one thing I would also note to you is that, like, if your OPT start date was, let's say, June 1st, right? But your first day on the job was like June 27th because they needed an orientation period or there was a waiting period before starting. I don't think I've ever had a student have a problem with waiting for that start date to be later than whatever was initially planned, so long as it's within a reasonable time frame.
Okay. My H1B to H4 change of status is still pending with USCIS. What is my status now, H1B or H4?
So if you filed an H-1B and you're currently on an H-1B I-94 and you filed the change of status, until the change of status is approved, you're not on H-4. You're still on the H-1B, but you are allowed to stay here based on that pending H-4 change of status.
Okay. Is it true that it's not safe to travel within 6 months of F1 STEM OPT visa expiry? If not, what timeline is safe for traveling outside USA? And I think we covered a lot of travel, but yeah.
We've traveled, but I think this one's like slightly different, right? So I think what you're kind of pinpointing is that there have been circumstances where when you try to re-enter with not that much time left on your STEM OPT, that an officer can ask, what is your plan, right? What are you going to do at the end of your STEM OPT? Are you trying to stay in the country? Are you going to go back to your home country, right? So what I would advise a lot of people in this circumstance is to have that plan. Is it that you're going to matriculate at a new university, right? Is it that you're going to maybe continue with a master's program, a PhD, and the like? Have that answer. If you don't have a plan and your hope is something is going to come about that is related to a green card, which you're not really allowed to have that intention at that moment on F1, then I probably wouldn't be traveling at that moment, right? I want to just remind everybody that every time you exit the country and you come in, even with a valid visa, right? Remember that you're opening yourself up to inspection and to an inquiry, because the CBP officer is allowed to ask you these questions, right? Even if you have the right documents, right? What is your intention? What is your intention? Do you have enough ties to your home country, right? I know that the Department of State approved it. That doesn't mean me as a CBP officer are also going to agree with my DOS counterparts.
Yeah. Okay. Is it good to defer your admission to next spring or fall in the current visa pause?
So I'm assuming that you're outside of the country, but that being said, I don't think you should take action like immediately, right? I think a lot of the universities are pretty understanding that there's a lot going on at the moment, right? But I really, really espouse to people to stay close to your DSOs, to keep in touch with your international students office, because what I can surmise, because trust me, they want the income, they want you to be a student at that organization, right? They're probably going to give you opportunities later on than usual in order to defer your admission if this continues to languish.
Yeah. Okay. I have just graduated and my OPD starts on July 31st. I am on F1 visa and want to apply for my wife's F2 visa. Can I apply now, or when would be the right time to apply?
So your wife's F2, right? I'm going to scoop everyone into the same bucket as these pauses, right? Because I do think that the pauses are going to impact spousal privileges as well. The ability to get an F2 visa stamp in your passport, because it's technically under the same bucket, even if your wife is not studying in the United States, right? What I can say is that the question of when is the right time to apply is actually a very hard question to answer, because we don't have any information about what's going to happen next, right? If the cost of booking an appointment is of no concern, right, and your wife is already outside of the country, then go ahead and try to at least secure an appointment maybe a couple months from now, just to kind of hedge your bets, right? Worst case scenario is that you lose the money because you had to miss the appointment because things are still languishing and there's no updates in terms of like the new processes that the government may be imposing at this time, right? I wish I had a better answer, but this is kind of like where we are right now. But I think that's still a pretty solid one, which is if you want to hedge your bets, you can hedge your bets. I just don't necessarily think that your wife is going to walk away with the F2 visa immediately if she were to go in, let's say today.
Yeah. Yep. My 797A has the I-94 till 2028, but when I check the portal, it shows the admit until is April 2025. Am I okay with my status?
So this is like a chicken and the egg question because I'm going to just make one assumption, right? I am assuming that your I-797A was issued after you entered the country and that triggered that admit until date, right? So just to give a very brief example, Yudi, let's say I entered the country in January on an F1, right? Well, I guess it's the duration status. Let's just assume it's a B1, B2. I entered the country on January 1st on a B1, B2. For some reason, my admit until date is like March 30th. I filed to change my status before March 30th on March 1st to an H-1B because, you know, that I'm allowed to do that for whatever reason. If the H-1B is approved thereafter, I usually would get a brand new I-94, right? And when I look online, my I-94 is still going to reflect my initial entry on the B1, B2's admit until date, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm trying to say to Karthik here is that if the I-797A was filed and was approved after when you were admitted the first time and what's reflected online, then what controls is the I-94 on your I-797A.
Mm-hmm.
Just to kind of double tap on that, the online I-94 is based on CBP and your entrances. The I-94 that's on the I-797A is one that's triggered and created by USCIS, and that's what triggers the discrepancy. I know we're in 2025. There should be ways to update those things on the systems, but they're two separate systems.
Also, there was like a lot of questions yesterday in my group. They asked me, apparently USCIS has removed or archived one of the pages for if you are laid off on H-1B to B1, B2. There was a web page on their website and they archived it. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I did hear about that, and I'm curious to hear because I think this is what triggered it, right? Under Biden, there was a tweet that went out from CBP and I believe DHS that say, oh, you know, on a B1, B2, you're allowed to look for new jobs. You can use it to buy time, you know, whatever it is, right? I'm kind of curious and wondering if they're going to be rolling back that kind of idea. There's no kind of like regulation on it specifically. There's nothing kind of like to say that is the case, but I am curious to think that might be why, right? Because I think a lot of people know that if you need to buy more time, you file to change status to B1, B2, right? To buy more time. But who knows? At the moment, I haven't heard anything stronger than that other than the archiving of that page.
Yeah. Okay. My parents, B1, B2, plan to visit next month to US in June 2025 from India for 4 months. They visited last time in June to November 2024. First time, 5 months to stay. Any issue or point to keep in mind?
Staying in America for 5 months or 4 months is a really long time, right? So this is actually a question that I pose a lot, which is, Nicole, when you enter on a B1, B2, the government lets you stay here for 6 months. I'm allowed to stay here for 6 months, right? My answer to that question is that is technically the case, but you need to have a reason for staying for 6 months, right? Because the government it's possible in this context that when your parents try to re-enter, they might say, why did you need to be here for 5 months? How did you support yourself, right? How were you working, right? How did you get an income? Are you secretly working in the United States, right? So what I will tell a lot of people is that don't stay for such an extended period of time, even if you're allowed to, unless there's a really good reason that falls under the allowances of a B1, B2, right? Is it that, I'll give you a good example. You know, your daughter who's in the United States is having some health issues, right? You want to be there to support her. And instead of staying 1 month, you're now here for 3 months because of those health issues, right? So be quite mindful. I think that the point to keep in mind, Pramod, is that 5 months is a long time. I know it happened in June of 2024, but the way that it feels like is that within almost close to 1 year to 1.5 year period that they're going to be spending a lot of time in the United States.
Yeah. My post-completion OPT expires on July 8th. I am in process of applying for STEM extension. My question is, what happens when my OPT expires? Can I continue working?
So if you apply for the STEM extension before the expiration of your post-completion OPT, right? It's timely filed, 765 is receipted in. You do get an automatic extension to continue working. So yes, you can continue working up until the moment that your STEM OPT is either approved, right? Or if it's denied, then you need to come talk to me.
Nice. H1B lost tech job in April 2025. Hard to find a tech job in current scenario. Can one startup and transfer H1B to the co-founded startup based on the new H1B modernization rule? Interesting.
I'm going to assume that what you meant is that can you found a startup and transfer it? Theoretically speaking, yes, but I don't think the intention of the government was to allow people to just open LLCs and open C corps and just be like, here's my new company, I'm going to be on H1B forever, right? I think the intention of the government is that if you truly have a company that has legs on it, and what I mean by legs is that it is pretty dang close to being operational. There's funding. There's like something going on that would require you to utilize your specialty occupation work or education, right? Then yes, great. But if you just open the company and all you have is the LLC and the entity and maybe some bylaws, right? There's no money, there's no bank account, there's no anything. You can't really argue to the government that the majority of your time is going to be spent on specialty occupation work. I actually try to tell a lot of people who are interested in doing the H-1B this way that you need to kind of treat it almost like an E2. So for many of you who are here who may not know what an E2 is, an E2 is a treaty investor visa, right? And in that context, you're supposed to show the government that your business is as operational as possible, right? You're coming here to develop and direct a business. In the H-1B context, my feeling is that they really want you to be doing something that would require you to have that H-1B, that there is going to be work for you here, that you are going to be paid, right? So that's what I'm going to tell you as your answer is that if you do have enough legs going for it, you have the funding, you have at minimum a product, a pitch deck, or just kind of things that show that you're operational, then maybe it could work.
Yeah. Okay. I'm starting my master's in computer science at ASU this fall on F1. Okay. Should I apply for H-1B right after graduation or first go on OPT? What if I'm not selected in the first H-1B round?
I mean, you should always apply for OPT if you qualify for OPT. That's my perspective. But I guess my question is, so you're starting your master's in computer science in ASU this fall. Should I apply for H-1B right after? So are you saying like 2 years later in your master's program? And when it ends, should I apply for H-1B right after graduation or first go on OPT? You should do both. What people don't realize is that the first time that you can enroll on your H-1B is actually technically in your last year of matriculation, right? So long as you have your degree in hand by June 30th of that year, right, you're allowed to technically, enroll in H-1B. But if you were going on your master's, you must have a bachelor's degree. So you could have even done it like year one of your master's and year two. So that's why like this question like throws me off, because it's like, well, you could do both, right? You can keep applying for the H-1B and also do OPT.
Yes. And technically they could even apply while they are in India. I mean, if they find an employer.
Yeah, like if you don't necessarily need to be in the United States to enroll in the H-1B lottery, right? I think people forget that. So I'm going to be here to espouse it, which is that if you have a foreign degree that is equivalent to a US bachelor's degree, or for every year that you are missing towards a 4-year degree, you have at least 3 years of full-time experience, right? To bridge that gap. Try for the H-1B if you have an employer in the United States waiting for you.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry for banning your question. I mean, I wasn't trying to ban your question. You were just spamming it. I have a friend who posted story about Palestine. Will this cause a problem for him when he apply for US visa?
So this is a very tough question to answer, right? And this is all I have to really say on the subject, right? Without kind of delving into politics and without delving into kind of very difficult and controversial topics at the moment, right? You have to be very considerate of the current environment, right? What I will say is that I'm not sure what your friend has said or what or how they say it, right? I think this is kind of an era and a time where being cautious on social media is more important than anything else.
Yeah. I have my F1 interview next week. So do I need to worry about something or take care of something? And what are the rejection rate after the news?
It's too soon to say what the rejection rates are, but I think I mentioned it in today's conversation. I have seen an uptick on administrative processing. That is not necessarily a true rejection. It's just that they're saying, hey, we need more time, right? That's like a pause, essentially.
Yeah. My parents are visiting on B1, B2 visa for 3 months since my sister-in-law is soon expecting a baby. So do you think that's a good enough reason for them to stay 3 months?
Technically, yes. I would recommend an invitation letter. The only thing that I would be careful about is that I've had anecdotes in the past, and I've had situations in the past where you'll find that one officer who says, hey, if your parents are helping take care of the baby, that's considered work, right? That's considered work. So I think a lot of it has to do with focusing on they're there to visit the baby for the first time. They're there to kind of celebrate a newborn, right? Less so on, I'm going to help take care of the baby while we're here.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. There's news in India that Mumbai consulate, they are rejecting visa in 10 seconds only without hearing answers. Is that true? I mean, I don't know. Rocks.
I mean, okay, this is what I'll say, right? On this, right? I think that what they're issuing are maybe 214B denials or 221G denials because they're basically being told you need to pause everything or you need to hold everything. The only thing that I can say is that I can't say whether it's 10 seconds only, is that true or false. Everything is so new, but the anecdotal evidence holds very clear. This is not the time to be applying for an F1, a J1, things that are tied to SEVIS.
My F1 visa expired in May 2025. My course finishes in April 2026. Same on I-20. Want to renew my visa so I can travel if emergency. Should I renew while I'm in college as I am Dropbox eligible or after graduation? Okay.
Dropbox or not, everything's being paused as far as I can see right now.
Even Dropbox?
Like essentially the whole entire consideration is that they need more scrutiny, right? The DS-160 as it stands at the moment, remember what I said earlier, Yudi, is that what are the questions that they're asking about social media, right? They're just kind of like looking at really, really old school platforms that nobody uses, right? That nobody uses. So my answer to the question is please, please, please do not travel. I really don't want people to be exiting the country for any reason at the moment, especially if you're tied to an F1, right? I do think that we may not have enough evidence. Like I don't have an anecdote at the moment for somebody who's doing a Dropbox appointment and what happened to them because everything has been so soon, right? But if they're telling the consulates like, hey, you need to pause like these F1s, right? That goes into still the same thing with a Dropbox. You're still asking for an F1 visa. You just don't have to go to the interview.
Yeah. Okay. My H-1B got picked through a recruiting company. Can I receive other pays like travel expenses through clients, like getting base pay from recruiting company and other expenses? Interesting.
So this is an interesting one. So I get a little bit concerned about recruiting companies because the basis of the H-1B is that there's a bona fide employer-employee relationship between you and that company, right? Who are you reporting to? Who's responsible for you? Who's supervising your day-to-day work? That's a little bit different from like, let's say a consulting firm, right? Where you are an employee of like a Cognizant of the world or a TCS of the world, and right? And you're being placed into a third-party entity because that's just the engagement, right? You need to be there to help with their IT or whatever software it is that was being purchased from that organization, right? But to answer your question on this, in terms of receiving other pays, you can get normal company benefits, right? If it is a normal company benefit for you to be reimbursed, then great, but it's not true income. Like reimbursements are reimbursements because those are costs for doing your job.
Yeah. Okay. My spouse H4 EAD has been pending since 7 months now. Are there any options to expedite it?
You can try. You can submit technically an EAD request, like an e-request to kind of check in on the case. Separately, you can say there are compelling circumstances, but I don't recommend it only unless you have a truly compelling circumstance. So I can give you an example of a similar situation, not an H4 EAD, but I did an EAD for someone who had to file a 485, so they became current, but they miscalculated and they were running out of time on their current status at the moment. I believe it was a TN, and obviously it's very hard to renew a TN if you are about to file for your adjustment, right? Because a TN doesn't allow you to have dual intent. So that person was about to be essentially out of a job until the EAD card was issued. And this was right after COVID, right? You had like a 10-month waiting time before you got an EAD card. In that situation, we were able to ask for compelling circumstances. We were able to request an expedite by showing that literally the company would fold if this person was not working, that about 20 Americans were going to lose their jobs because this person was not able to complete their projects and be working at that moment, right? So all of this is to say is that there is a way, but 7 months, to be honest with you, it could be still within reasonable processing times, depending on the service center that's adjudicating your EAD.
Okay, last couple questions. I entered US on F2 visa, converted to F1 year. On approval notice, it's written validity DS, duration of stay. What? That's my guess. That's what it means. What is the validity of my F1 status?
It's the duration of status. So yeah, so your validity is actually tied to your I-20, right? So if you're here on an F1, right, and you applied that change of status, you usually would get like a new I-94 on that approval notice that says DS, right? It's because the government issues that based upon the fact that they also don't know how long your schooling is going to take, right? Generally, if it's a bachelor's degree, it's 4 years, but sometimes things happen. Maybe like another person said, like they were on their PhD program, but because their research work is taking longer than expected, they had to extend it another year. So what controls is actually not what is listed there. What controls is the underlying I-20. So you will need to double check your paperwork there to say, you know, when is my program end date? When am I allowed to be here until? And separately, you need to maintain the fact that you're going to school. Because even if you did have a printout of an I-20 that said that your end date was at XYZ, if you're no longer going to school, then that's not valid anymore.
Okay. I'm on STEM OPT applying to new jobs. Can I say will not be requiring visa sponsorship in future in order to continue working? If I'm planning to marry my fiance sometime before my OPT ends in 3 years.
So here's the thing, right? This is actually not an immigration question because you're telling me like, what do I answer to a prospective employer, right? If you truly do not need visa sponsorship, then great, right? You should answer the question very truthfully, right? The only thing that I'm considerate of is the fact that no matter what, if you're changing jobs on STEM OPT, you need to submit a new I-983, right? Even if it's not necessarily the same as a true normal visa application, you're still asking the company to affirm certain things, to affirm like the kind of work that you're going to be doing, the kind of training that you're going to have, right? So I never want to put you in a position where you mark no, and then you show up to your first day to HR saying like, hey, I need you to sign this, or to your orientation, and they're going to be like, wait a second. I thought that you're gonna you don't need any help, that you don't need any paperwork.
Yeah, I mean, and technically, even for STEM OPT, they would have to, like file paperwork.
They need the I-983. You need to submit that training plan to the government, so that even though it's not necessarily a normal visa sponsorship, it is a level of affirmation. They do need to sign those things under perjury. They need to sign those things to the government.
Yeah. All right. One last question, and we'll let you go. I'm on F1 CPT, planning to work remotely from India. with employer approval, given current scenarios, returning in September post CPT, any issues at entry?
Okay.
Oh boy.
All right. Let me break this down. Right. You're planning on working remotely from India with employer approval, given the certain current scenarios, returning any issues at entry. If your F1 visa stamp is valid, I don't necessarily see an issue, right? If your F1 visa stamp is not valid and you're relying on getting it renewed during this plan where you're abroad, then you're going to have some problems because there's nothing to say right now when those things are going to restart. So that's going to be my answer.
Yeah. And when you say F1 visa valid, you mean it's like F1 visa is
The
doesn't
stamp in
expire.
your passport.
Yeah.
The stamp that's in your passport. So gentle reminder to everyone, just to kind of conclude, because I mentioned this before, a lot of people get confused by the term visa, right? So I want to have two things for F1 students in particular, right? You have two documents. You have an I-20, right, is what allows you to be in the United States, allows you to work. If you have the work authorization listed on it, that's the I-20. Separately, there's a document in your passport, that little page with your face on it that says visa on it. That is the F1 visa stamp. So what I was referring to earlier in terms of is it valid or is it not valid is actually your stamp, because your stamp is what allows you to leave the country and come back in, because that's your entry permit. That is what allows you to enter the country on the F1.
Yeah. Love it. Awesome. Thank you, Nicole, for doing this. And again, if anybody else who have any questions and they want to reach out, I've already put the link. You can go and talk to Manifest team. But again, Nicole, thank you so much for doing this. Can't wait to do this again.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks everyone for being here and asking all the questions that you need answered. I guess like just some closing remarks, which is that, listen, everybody has a lot of journeys. Everybody has a lot of questions. Everybody has a lot of things that are going on right now. Manifest, we're more than happy to help anyone that we can help, answer the questions that we can answer. So please feel free to reach out and we'll do our best to support you.
Amazing. Awesome. All right. I'm going to end the stream.